farming communities. Hunger persists because of conflict and war, natural disasters, climate change, and poverty. But hunger actually starts in the womb. Every year, 17 million children are born underweight. Ideally, a minimum of 1,800 kilocalories a day should be consumed to be healthy. Yet many people go through days, weeks, and months living on much less. Undernourishment is the lack of enough energy and nutrients. It is a less visible form of hunger that affects mothers, children, urban and rural poor. Hunger continues to be a serious problem. 3.1 million children die of malnutrition each year. That's almost 55% of all deaths in children under 5 years old. But hunger can be stopped. You can do something about it. You just need to know how. Engage and help. Spark change. Stop hunger.
So part of what I wanted to just show you is that hunger is actually a far more lethal killer than AIDS. It's a far more lethal killer than tuberculosis, than malaria. It is the number one on the list of the world's top 10, right, of killers. And yet, here we are, our GDP is growing, and yet the number of hungry children, the most vulnerable, have significantly decreased. So we started in 2013 and now we're very happy to join in this because we think that if we all join together, and it starts with governance, with the laws that are formed, but in the end it goes down to the people, the local government officials, and the school teachers, the parents, to actually make this work. We think that the statistics will show you, you've heard it, many Filipinos never reach their true potential. And if we don't reach our true potential, how can we hope to compete globally? How can we compete as athletes, as scholars, as scientists?
Thank you so much, Ms. Maria Ressa. So she talked about how underrated malnutrition is among all advocacies. I mean, it's there, it's been present for the longest time, but as our economy progresses, the way we address malnutrition, the problem, isn't sufficient enough. And actually, those are astonishing numbers. 45% of the children's deaths, 5 below, are because of malnutrition. So now, let's hear from a Nestle Philippines Senior Vice President for Communication, Marketing, and Innovation to talk about what Nestle has in store for malnutrition or against malnutrition. Mr. Paulo Mercado.
Thank you very much. As Jack said earlier, Nestle, in its very foundation 150 years ago, was founded on helping the hungry. In the story of Hungry Nestle, and it was in the little town of Switzerland, in the little town of Vevey in Switzerland, he had helped a neighbor whose child was starving and was not able to ingest milk, and he created the first cereal. And we've carried that in our DNA throughout the years. Yes, we're very well known for coffee, chocolate, milk, and other products. But fundamentally, deep in our heart, Nestle really truly believes that providing accessible nutrition to people all over the world, and especially in the countries that we are in, is critical to our business and our future. One of the main things, for example, that we do currently is that we partnered very strongly with FNRI to try to figure out what are the key micronutrient deficiencies that are happening in the Philippines, and how can we actually scientifically formulate some of our products to be able to address that. And it became one of the most fundamental reformulations that we did with the Bear Brand product. And but not only did we reformulate Bear Brand, we also made sure to formulate it in a way that it remains affordable to a vast majority of Filipinos. And of course, on the communication and marketing side, we create very memorable songs that everybody sings. They sing that the Nestle jingles are among the top 10 last song syndromes of 2015 and 2016, with micronutrient deficiency and more recently energy gap. But marketing and product formulation, we have one of the largest nutrition research institutes in the world, And we constantly look not only at formulating our products for, let's say, marketing added value, but we look at ways in which we could help contribute to resolve or to help address issues related to nutrition. And last but not least, of course, and the reason why we're here tonight is really supporting initiatives to gather a lot of people together in uniting against the fight on malnutrition and hunger.
Alright, thank you so much, Mr. Paulo Mercado. So we talked about reformulating or changing the nutrients or adding nutrients in your products to be able to address these issues directly. So I think that's all. It's very, very amazing how we're all here tonight, regardless of what group we're in. Just to, to be able to bring the underrated issue of malnutrition back up to people's mindsets and remind them na, oy, eto, kailangan natin ito i-address. So, thank you so much to all our speakers. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions about the topic. So, I encourage you all to please post on your social media accounts. Use the hashtag Hangry about hunger. So, babasahin po namin yung mga tanong nyo. Kung meron po kayong mga comments, questions, we will be entertaining questions from the audience, such as this actually. So, from Heidi Sarol, what are other issues? Mamaya. Patikim pa lang yun. So, please do post. So, ito na. What are other issues that need to be addressed in order to reduce the incidences of hunger and malnutrition? So, why don't we start with Doc Mar?
Yeah, I think that is a question that common. But we need to understand the reasons. The chronology. Let's, for example, if you are hungry, that means you are not taking enough food, proper food, or for several days you have not taken that, and as a result of prolonged hunger, you'll be having your what you call underweight. So if you have underweight, like kumukulang ka sa timbang, and if that is that condition is further prolonged, nagiging stunted ka. So this situation, I think the question is something that what are the other can we say
factors po? Ano po yung other factors that cause malnutrition?
In terms of hunger, the availability of appropriate food, the right quality, and of course accessibility, and yung kanyang cost ng pagkain, affordability.
So it's not necessarily poverty that causes malnutrition. So marami pang ibang cause.
Marami pang. And information, correct information about the proper type of food to eat.
When you talk about lack of access, what do you mean exactly?
Maybe some of this particular type of food that may be rich in certain micronutrients will not be available within the area. We are talking about, say for example, in the rural area. Many of us, hindi natin alam that those indigenous vegetables can contribute to better nutrition. How many of us eat here, like talinong? You know that? You can see it just around. How many of us eat here, himbabao?
Ano po yun?
It's a type of vegetable. Those are indigenous vegetables that are free, that are, but information about the benefit that you can derive from this indigenous vegetable has been lacking. So we need to inform the public that there are other sources of food, vegetables that are around us that can be accessed.
So it's not just lack of access, but also lack of information about food and nutrition.
Yeah.
So, kay Doc Ruiz naman po, do you think change of diet is enough? Meaning, if you add more nutrients to your food, or do you think there are other things that you should address?
Not by diet alone. There are also other things like sanitation and safety. If we are poor in that aspect, then our children are more prone to infections and infectious diseases. can cause other repercussions. Also, I advocate for women empowerment because they are the ones that determine what to eat, what to buy. So they must be well educated so that they can adjust whatever they have in terms of their economy, in terms of capability, as well as their education and what they can provide for their children.
Now, we've been talking about the problem of malnutrition, but how come it's been, so underrated for the past few years? Is it because we put too much emphasis on poverty, or other issues? Or is it just because it's not sexy to deal with? What do you think about that, Ms. Maria?
It's a hidden problem again, right? So poverty really is the primary cause if you don't have money to buy food. A survey we did with the World Food Program, for example, showed that in some instances, Masbate, for example, 94% of the survey respondents said that they borrowed money for food. 94% borrow money for food. If they borrow money for food, they can't afford. If they don't have access to information, they can't afford the right food. And then think about how that filters down to the kids. If you don't have a feeding program, then you have a problem, right? So the bill addresses that. How do you deal with that as a government? We have these words that are so out there, when in the end you have to think it's about the babies, it's about our Filipino kids. The way government would deal with it is we'll have an anti-poverty program. We'll have CCT, right? The conditional cash transfer to give to the poorest family with the idea that that will be used for food or a lot of other things that they need. But it doesn't mean it will be used for food necessarily. So in addition to that, let's say the last government created 45,000 feeding centers. But it doesn't legislate to local government officials how they're going to actually deal with malnutrition. So then it depends on the leadership of each mayor, of each governor, how they're going to do that. And if they have other policies. Again, what takes the headlines right now? The war on drugs. I like the war on against hunger. That's actually really cool, because that, if we do that, we will build a better generation. At least one that reaches our full potential.
To be very honest with you, when I hear issues about hunger, the picture that comes to mind for me are the faces of African children, African citizens, but not really of Filipino children. It's usually that's a lack of education, lack of resources. So is it because of marketing, Sir Paulo?
I think one of the key points in just to add on to what Maria had said earlier, let's also remember that the Philippines has experienced and is experiencing, I would say, the longest growth run in quite a long time. It's been almost 10 years of consistent growth, and we have been growing at a clip of about 5.5% per year. And this in 2016 is projected, it's estimated as we have grown 6.8%, and maybe even exceed that in 2017. When you have that kind of positive momentum in the economy, then the tendency seems to be that, hey, there's a sense of denial that malnutrition is a problem. And malnutrition doesn't seem to be something that's happening in our backyard anymore. So we tend to externalize it, that is something that happens elsewhere. So the reality is malnutrition is something that we do need to continue to put in front of people, and that we need to put to drive people not only to know about it, but to care about it. And the care part is actually very difficult, because this is where we need to make the experience of hunger real for people, and then to also make them understand what is the long-term impact on our country.
More personal in that aspect.
Yep.
Actually, if you come to think about it, why would these parents spend on quantity food when they have other things to think about, like education, like sending their children to school, living on a day-to-day basis? Why would you invest on that?
Yes.
Maybe it's because of lack of information.
Yes.
Now we still have questions from the audience. Let's turn over the floor to our audience for questions. Anybody? Do you have a question? Yes, ma'am? Please state your name, your organization, and your question.
Hi, I'm Ricarda from ASEAN Youth Leaders Association. I have a question for Mr. Paolo. Since I'm a marketing person also, I'm concerned about how does your group intend to spread the word about malnutrition and fight against hunger? Any other initiatives that could engage millennials to join you, Nestle, in this advocacy?
I will be introducing that in quite an extensive way later on in the program. But fundamentally, United for Healthier Kids is a coalition that we are forming. It's a coalition not just of Nestle, but it is a coalition together with several other partners that we are uniting under one platform. And that platform is actually a website, a very simple URL, u4hk.ph, which we want people like yourself to just simply visit. And when you visit, you will not only get facts about malnutrition, but you will actually get access to each of the partner NGOs that we have, where you will have the opportunity to actually volunteer, donate, or share directly to those NGOs when you visit the platform. So for us, we want the U4HK effort to be a direct link from generating awareness, generating empathy, into providing you a portal for direct action.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am?
Hi, my name is Kathy from S.PH. This is for anyone in the panel. So in the latest SWS survey, the self-rated food poverty was at 34%. And in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, the numbers actually vary. Why do you think there's a difference, and what can we do to actually address this? As mentioned earlier by Ms. Grace Poe, it seems that the things that are being given a lot of attention are aesthetics, and the real problems are not being concerned or a concern by society. How can we push this further without becoming too self-righteous? And how can we make people more aware that this really is an important thing that should be addressed by every single one of us here in this room and outside using our own influences?
Anybody who would like to answer that?
Start with each. We're all here. How many are we? Maybe 200 people. We start with each of our networks. If you believe in it, then you spread it. It is fundamental. It is the future. It is part of not just governance, but our private lives. So why do they differ? Partly, I think you've seen all the stats. It's partly because of the farmers themselves, the markets that are created, the lack of education in terms of what needs to happen, the type of government assistance that goes in. I mean, perhaps you can talk more about that in terms of how much is given to hunger, to malnutrition. Not as much as...
Doc Mark?
Yes, not that much, but I'd like to say that there's the differences between the statistics and from different areas. Just you see the climate change. Do we see the rain in Manila? Now, you can see that. You can hear what's happening in Cebu. You can see what's happening in Cagayan de Oro. So if there's a prolonged rain and we have drought the north, then you can see the various statistics. So that's one. And also in terms of the what you call the geographically isolated area, the GIDA. So based on our data, these are the islands that have been not easily reached by assistance. So that's why we identified that areas which are very difficult to reach by intervention, by assistance, they are worse off in terms of hunger and malnutrition. So you can see the differences between areas. And we need to direct our intervention, our assistance to this particular area. One mention is the farmers, but we zero into the farmers. Who among these farmers, and you will be surprised, is the fisher folk, yung ating mga manging isda. And they are the one catching our fish, but their children are worse off. The stunting rate is about 40%. 4 out of 10 of their kids are stunted. Bakit? So those are the things that if we put intervention, we need to focus along this area, and we know that based on our data.
Sir, I think I just want to ask a question, because I think this is very, very important. At the backstage, we were talking about malnutrition, kung ano talaga yung malnutrition. Kasi sabi natin, when we have feeding programs or when we dole out food to the poor, it's usually carbs. Katulad ng kinain natin, giniling na mais, lugaw. Pero ano ba yung kailangan natin exactly na nandoon para sapat yung nutrition?
Yes, akong sinasabi natin malnutrition, maraming mukha kasi ang malnutrition. Mukha ng sobra, mukha ng malnutrition na kulang. But if we talk about yung kulang, which is the underweight or stunting, ano ba ang kinakain ng ating mga children, mga 6 months onward? Yung sinasabi ni Senator na first 1,000 days. So, punta tayo dun sa 6 months to 2 years. Ano yung commonly kinakain nila? And these are lugaw, and you experience it. If we want to be nourished, it should contain at least the carbohydrates and the good quality protein. So, a combination of this will promote growth. Just a simple combination, bigas at munggo. Ano ang nasa bigas? These are carbohydrates. But they are not much in terms of protein. So pag sinamahan mo siya ng munggo, which is very rich in protein, in the right proportion, and the protein quality nitong munggo ay mas maganda at isama mo sa bigas, then it will promote growth. So, nagiging underweight sila kasi kulang yung tinatawag nating protein and energy. But bukod pa doon, kulang pa siya sa micronutrient. So that's why we are proposing that a program on food fortification. So that's how we address it. We need to understand yung mga problema and yung causes and process. Yung kinakain, anong klase ng pagkain.
Kumbaga carbohydrates, protein, tsaka energy. Kaya mag-Milo na tayo lahat. Hindi gusto ko na ipasok yun. Beat the energy gap. Now we have one last question from the audience.